Hi there, and welcome to another episode of the Rabid Dog's House, where we like to discuss lost or forgotten horror gems with a little bit of bite. I'm Justin, and tonight we are going to discuss 1992's Raising Cain. Directed by Brian De Palma and starring John Lithgow, Lolita Davidovich, Stephen Bauer, Greg Henry, and Frances Sternhagen. Carter Nix is the son of a notorious child psychologist that went a little too far in his experiments, and Carter, now a child psychologist himself, is a little too focused on the development of his own child. Carter's wife Jenny is concerned, but soon distracted by a past love of her life that has suddenly returned. Unfortunately, Carter's life is becoming too complicated. When it gets too complicated, Carter tends to be visited by the sinister Cain, the youthful Josh, as well as the vengeful Margo, and it is up in the air as to which one gets to control Carter's life. Brian De Palma's Raising Cain is for the horror fan that enjoys a multifaceted 1990s psychological thriller. Also joining me tonight is my amazing co-host, Zena Dixon. Well, thanks again, everybody, for joining us for the Rabid Dog's House, where we like to discuss lost or forgotten horror gems with a little bite. I'm Justin. With me, as always, is the amazing, wonderful Zena Dixon, the real queen of horror. How you doing tonight, Zena?
I'm doing so well. Very excited. Very excited.
Good. Me too, because tonight we are discussing Raising Cain. As always, we'll start with our non-spoiler reviews, and then we will jump into spoilers, so you're safe for now. I'll just say real quick, because this was your first time watching it, wasn't it?
Yes.
Excellent. And I love that because this is a movie that I feel like I've seen many, many times, and I've probably kind of taken it for granted, as I think most people kind of do. It's one of Brian De Palma's films. And,
Hmm.
he is obviously known for Carrie, Dress to Kill. I mean, we had our Dress to Kill episode where we kind of talked about it, Body Double, Blowout, all these movies, he's known for. And I think Raising Cain kind of gets lost in the mix now a little bit, but I've
Hmm.
always loved it. It's one of those I saw on TV, I've watched with my brothers. It's just always been a part of my life, but I do kind of take it for granted. And I think it's a really solid Brian De Palma entry and a really great 90s thriller. At the time, multiple personalities, was a big thing. You saw it on every Jerry Springer, Sally Jesse Raphael show. I'm not surprised Brian De Palma incorporated it. As we've discussed, Brian De Palma, he's definitely a fan of Hitchcock, and you definitely see shots from Psycho in this movie or different elements that are very common to what he kind of does. I always say Brian De Palma, I think, is the best at remaking films. I don't think that this isn't a remake. His
Hmm.
films aren't remakes, but he takes things that, like, I think most people want to see in a remake. So if you're a fan of Alfred Hitchcock, the way Brian De Palma uses Hitchcock, it's almost like he's remaking some of these films for contemporary audiences. And I think that's what most remakes try to achieve. But Raising Cain, I just think it's crazy, over the top, right to it. Now, there's also a director's cut of this, which we will talk about a little bit. You've seen it. It's essentially this movie switched around. So,
Hmm.
at the last minute, he took certain scenes and switched them. So in this, you find out right off the bat, John Lithgow's sort of something's a little off, all this. But in the director's cut, it starts from his wife's perspective. So there's like the sequence where she goes into the clocks and she's in that clock store. That's where the movie was supposed to begin. And you're kind of with her for a while. But we'll discuss that down the road. I'll just say I love John Lithgow in this performance, as well as this being an underrated Brian De Palma film. I feel like John Lithgow is one of those underrated actors. I think he's been appreciated. People know him, but he can do anything. He can play an alien on 30 Rock. He can play a villain in Blowout. He can play the father in Harry and the Hendersons, and you believe him in each and every single role. And there's a serious dramatic role in terms of endearment. All these roles he's able to do effortlessly, and he's worked with Brian De Palma a couple times, from my understanding. And you can see why the director likes him, appreciates him. He jumps right into a role and he chews it and he makes it his own, and then his own, and then that role over there is also his own. Lolita Davidovich, she's great at it too. I think very believable as the wife. I love her whole little side story and her development. again, Brian De Palma is known for the long, grand shots that he does, these sort of elaborate setups, which when we get to the ending, we'll go into detail about it. But this movie has that. It's like Carrie, he has these scenes that like are all about being built up in order to create this tension. He does that again in this one. But overall, I just love it. I'm a big fan of it. But I have been aching to know, Zena, what did you think of Raising Cain?
I usually do not take notes, but I had to take notes on this one because, this one has a familiar storyline, but it is packed with a lot of things going on. But I mean that in the best way. When the movie started, I was completely hooked. Okay. From what we talked about, I kind of knew what was going to happen. But I'm even thinking back, like I wish that if I would have watched this as a kid, I was going to say, if I wish I would have watched it as a kid, like I totally appreciate watching it now. If I would have watched it as a kid, it would have completely scared the crap out of me. Because, when it comes to Carter, he just seems like that guy next door. He seems like a nice guy, if you don't look too much into him, kind of thing. He has a family. His wife seems loving. He has a daughter. Anyway, I'm jumping ahead. I really, really enjoyed this one. I watched it once and then I had to watch it again because I felt like there was some stuff that I missed. I still feel like there's stuff that I missed, and I'm definitely going to watch it again. But I love, like, it kind of is like a self-reflection type of thing of movie. You know what I mean? Where it's just like you have this man, there's clearly something going on with him, right? But as the viewer, you're unsure about that. In that opening scene, you just can I spoil it or should I wait?
I feel like we'll announce spoilers, but go ahead because it's the
Okay.
opening scene and
Okay.
it spoils
Well,
right away. That's part of the joy of this film.
when he gives this woman a ride, he just seems like, or she's giving him a ride, him and his daughter, and it just seems like a normal thing. Nothing's going to happen, especially not with the kids in the back seat. But then they kind of get into a conversation, and it turns a little heated, more on Carter's side. The next thing you know, when you think that he's going to get caught, right? Um, you see Carter, another Carter, like his different personality outside the window. And even the way it was shot was completely different. Like, I don't know. I love the feel of this movie. And I kind of went in, I tried my best to avoid like trailers and stuff like that. Other than what you told me, I feel like I went in blind and I really, really enjoyed it. I just feel like there's just so much to pull apart, like to break down with this movie. Even what you mentioned with his wife. They could have just had her just be like a supportive wife, but it was just the fact that there was something going on there. And then you have to ask yourself why and even how that happens. And then the dream sequences, there's so much. I love it. Just feels like Brian De Palma is like toying, like he was kind of like playing around with cinema. Like it felt like he wanted to explore. And as the viewer, like I felt that. Like, I don't know, I really, really enjoyed this one, like a lot. And I know if I would have watched it as a kid, it would have terrified me, but I would have been in love with it.
For sure. Well, then we'll jump right into spoilers. And here's the interesting thing. I think maybe I'll talk about the director's cut a little bit because the director's cut, if the director's cut had been released, we would have to start more hard on the spoilers part of things. Because this movie does open, it lays it all out for you right away that like something's off with John Lithgow, the character of Carter.
Mhm.
This, twin brother appears from nowhere. So you're sort of like, wait, what's going on? So it's interesting that when he decided to do the director's cut at the last minute, the producers, I guess, or behind the scenes decided like they were worried, I guess, that the audience might get lost a little bit, or it's something about John Lithgow's performance. He's doing so much, you almost forget about him in the director's cut because it goes from Lolita Davidovich's character is with the clocks. You see her husband. She's then talking to her friend. And the problem with the director's cut is that there would have been a lot more flashbacks because you kind of go through her story all the way through with the sort of uh, the clock that plays music, that storyline. She thinks she leaves it here. I mean, it goes all the way up to the moment where he suffocates her, and then it splits, and it, no pun intended, it splits and goes to his perspective, and it's told in flashback. So certain things that she's saying like, oh, Carter came into the, she's telling her friend, Carter came into the room and he was worried about Amy. And you eventually see this, but if you're not really paying close attention, you kind of miss what she was talking about. When you see it in the flashback, you're like, ah, this is what she's talking about. Now, I've
Yeah.
seen the film several times, so I knew exactly what they were doing. And it is more suspenseful. And with that route, and you know I'm all about my strong females and I love them. You do get with her in the director's cut a little bit more, there's a little bit more payoff with her character because we started with her, as opposed to the bizarreness that they decided to go to by having it start with John Lithgow. They decided to make it a little bit more obvious, and there's still a lot of tension and a lot of suspense. I think it would have been more suspenseful, the director's cut, but I do kind of think they did the right thing with the way they released it, because John Lithgow's performance, if you're almost halfway through the movie and you start seeing this, you're going to be like, WTF, what's going on? Whereas this, it's almost sort of like, well, what's going to happen? What's going to happen with his character? Like that first scene you were saying, there's this false sense of security where you're sort of like, oh, things are normal. Then you see him starting to sneeze, something's off, and then he does what he does. But then very Brian De Palma, where he lets the moment, he has no problem stretching it out. And you have those two like joggers getting closer and closer. And you're like, okay, are they not there yet? But that's what he does. Like he makes it so long. Then all of a sudden, Cain pops up. And that's what, and I think that it was the right choice to go this route, even though I love my strong women and I love I want her to have her payoff. And I think she still has it. It's not as much of a oomph because when the director's cut, you're really with her. But I'll just say, jumping right into the performances, because although it's a Brian De Palma film and it's all about cinema and appreciation of cinema, this is definitely a performance-driven movie, and a lot of the tension comes from that. Like I already kind of alluded to, but I guess a little bit more detail, John Lithgow, he can do anything, he can play anything, and this movie shows that with all of his split personalities. You have his personality of Josh, the little boy, and you see the little boy at one point, but you hear his performance of it too. Cain, Carter, and Margo. I love how that all wraps up. But it's just really clever. Lolita Davidovich, they work well together as a couple. You can see it, but I also believed her in terms of the line, in terms of you could see how she ended up with Carter, but you also feel the passion, the angst she has for the Stephen Bauer character. And I thought he was really good too. All of the cast worked together as an ensemble, but they each all had their little show moment, their moment to shine. And I thought that was great. And ultimately, Frances Sternhagen, who I always know her from Sex and the City as Bunny, who's this like uppity, really wealthy woman. But I also realized there's so many movies I've seen her in where she's so down to earth, like Misery, like this one. But because of my first impression of her, it's always hard for me. But I think she's great in this movie and always welcome. But John Lithgow really leads this cast, and it could be a caricature, it could be silly, but at that time, multiple personalities, after the whole Sybil thing, it became like a phenomenon in culture that like all of a sudden everybody had these repressed memories, and they were being misdiagnosed in a lot of cases with multiple personality disorder, which I think doesn't even get like, it's like dissociative identity now. They changed it because so many, like, it became almost the laughing stock of psychiatry. But if you embrace that idea, then you're going to love John Lithgow's character in this movie. It really, it encapsulates that idea so well.
And John Lithgow, like I always knew that he was incredible because, as you said, he was in a lot of things. But I remember I was really into the series Dexter.
Oh,
And
he was great in Dexter.
oh my gosh, he was amazing as like the Trinity killer,
Yes.
So I knew that he was going to bring it. But yeah, his performance is incredible. You believe him. He really did come off as if he was those different people, which I absolutely loved. I feel like Jenny did like a great job, she you kind of, not that you're like, go ahead, cheat on him, you know what I mean? But it's just
Right.
like in a way, it's like her whole life is kind of a lie. You know what I mean? But yeah, I just kind of feel like John Lithgow, like you said, he completely stood out. Like I just feel like he's just one of those guys, like you said. Again, I keep on saying that, but he can play anything. He can be in a serious tone, he can be creepy, he can be funny. He's very talented.
100%. Well, I'll say with Jenny, you're right. And what I do like about this movie is because of everything that happens with Carter, in terms of the cheating stuff, it's kind of like it forgives her the movie. Like, oh, you were right to kind of be in love with Jack
Mhm.
because Carter's was willing to murder you, you know, even if it wasn't his personality. So, you know, it's kind of
Right.
cool. Like it sort of forgives her that element because it was the right thing to do. I think that like there's so much in every Brian De Palma movie to always enjoy, and this one's no exception. Again, depending on what version you see, but the theatrical cut I think is excellent, and I think its strength is that it allows you to understand right off the bat that John Lithgow's character is kind of something's wrong, something's off, and you have these moments where he has this sort of Cain face on, and he's going to like go sleep with Carter's wife, even though it's technically his wife. But then you hear this kid screaming, and you know that it's not the little girl because he left the door open. And that's
Yeah.
what Brian De Palma does well, is even when you're identifying with like villain characters, you still feel like it's not that you want them to get away with it, but you get nervous for them. A good example is the scene with Jenny in the car. Like when she's floating down, it's like you don't want anything to happen to her and you're nervous from that, but you're also nervous in terms of like, is somebody going to catch
Hmm.
Cain in the act of doing this? And it's a weird thing. Now that goes back to Psycho and Anthony Perkins' portrayal as Norman Bates, that you know there's that sequence, and again remember we're in spoiler territory, everybody, but there's the sequence, same thing with the car. In fact, it's the same shots. You know, you see the car sinking into the lake, the pond, and the sun's coming up. But in both versions, the same thing. You're kind of like, wait, is he going to get caught? What's going to happen? Is the car going to get stuck? But for me too, I don't know what this says about me, but I remember when I was a kid watching Psycho for the first time, I was sort of like waiting for there to be like a knock on the trunk from Marion because you can't accept that the main character is like gone and you're like so excited. I remember that. So I thought it was cool that Brian De Palma in this movie, he gives you that because Jenny does wake up and she is trying to like get out, and then you feel for her now, and he does
Hmm.
this nice thing of where you're constantly in stress for different characters for different reasons. Like you have this sort of Gabrielle Carteris, who is Beverly Hills 90210.
Hmm.
She's sort of deplorable as this babysitter, but you know something's going to happen to her. But anyway, what did you think of the suspense and all of those kind of Brian De Palma type moments? Because you're a big fan of Carrie, I know.
I am, and I felt like it felt different.
Mhm.
Obviously from Carrie, not that it should feel the same, and I think that that's why I love it. I feel like for me, his movies always feel different for me. Whenever I watch his movies, and man, like the suspense I feel from the start. Again, as the viewer, you are getting it. Like from the start. Then on top of that, it's just kind of like when you also find out Carter's backstory and his reasoning as to why he is the way that he is, you still have sympathy for him, not because he's like, obviously he's killing people and he needs to stop, but he really really just needs help. And I find it insane, going sidetrack, that Jenny, she never noticed anything. There was nothing. And then kind of what you touched on, until she was talking to her friend, is it Karen? She was
Yeah.
talking to her friend at the park, and she mentioned the thing about how, they were messing around, having a good, sexy, smexy time. And then he goes to go check on their daughter, and then he gets in the car and drives away. And it's just like, how many times has he done that? That cannot be the first time that he's done something like that. And kind of like what you said, again, it's like every single time when he's watching Jenny and Jack in the woods, like he's gonna get caught. Like he's going to get caught. Somebody's going to see him. So it's like when it comes to like the suspense, the tension, this movie definitely has it. And you already know that there's going to be something horrible happening to these women. And I love the fact that you did mention Andrea of 90210, because I was
Yes,
like, man,
Andrea, yes.
she looks familiar. I was like, I wonder if it's Andrea, but I was like, no, that's not, because I don't remember her name. But I was like, I don't know if that's Andrea. So, but yeah, and then also too, just again with the tension, like the suspense. The thing is, it's definitely in his different personalities, because you never know who you're going to get. So that's kind of like what love seeing with that. And then just the fact that he lived in a regular community. Not only did his wife not suspect anything, his daughter's too young, but no one in the neighborhood, everybody just thought that he was just like this regular man, except There was he a retired police officer or detective that came in?
Correct. Yep.
And they were making fun of him, which was just like, come on, don't you want to listen? And then not only just with that, but Lynn, Dr. Lynn, she's another one where it's just like, clearly she knew, again, with the whole backstory, she just so happens to have worked with his father, but she's never met him, right? This was her first time actually seeing him. So, oh my gosh, which her performance, by the way, she did a great job as well.
Yeah, I thought she was fantastic. Also, I just think like some of the clever moments too, speaking of the police station, with when he has concocted, you see the deviousness of Cain, and you see that because of John Lithgow's performance when they're at the park and he's deciding, I'm gonna use this guy's coat. Because it's like he does care, because that's the whole point of Cain, is that he's a protector of Carter.
Right.
Like that's what got him out. And even though he's this evil character, his main responsibility is to always protect Carter, but also he gets revenge for Carter. And although it doesn't work out, he ends up going, he puts the blood with this coat. He's making sure that the Jack is going to get caught. But at the police station, when that retired police officer's there, if you watch the sketch that's being created, it's very clearly Jack, And I just think like it's just a clever idea that like technically it's Carter who's doing this, but really it's Cain who's protecting Carter. And I think then as we get towards like the climax and everything, with the whole denouement of Frances Sternhagen's character, Dr. Lynn, she gives us all the answers. Now, we don't know how the movie's going to play out at this point, and I think it's done in a really interesting way. Again, very Brian De Palma, where they're kind of walking down all these stairs, and the police officers are listening, but they have to kind of keep ushering her. She starts to walk the wrong way, and it looks like that's done in all in one take. So again, this older actress who has to have this stamina to not only walk down the stairs but keep the lines going while making sure it's interesting. And I'm interested the whole time because it is almost like a medical textbook reading of her experience, but I think she does a great job. And I love then when it all kind of comes to the moment where they're at the police station. We find out now what happened to Jenny. We find out she has come back, she attacks Carter, and I like that it's like, she's going to get her real triumph, but this is her little moment of revenge because she does not know yet that she thinks it's Carter that tried to drown her, which it was, but it's Cain. And I like that, like, when they're having their moment, she's yelling at him. Carter doesn't know what's going on and is like asking Cain for help. And she's like, who the heck are you talking to? And I love the whole moment too, because you've seen these TV cameras throughout the house because he's always watching the daughter, which is creepy. But like it's used in a way to tell the story where you see Jenny at one point and something's wrong and that's how she attacks. But anyway, so you get to the hospital, but I love the sequence between the doctor and John Lithgow as Cain. Well, it's mostly as Josh and Margo, and it's super creepy the way that his mannerisms, but she's also, in control until she's not in control. And I really loved that whole sequence. But what did you think about that between them or whatever else?
Okay, well, there was so much. Okay. So first though, something I was thinking, and I meant to tell you this, 'cause I was trying to like find a way to describe it, like the whole movie and stuff like that, which it will lead into what I'm talking about, so it doesn't feel like I'm like jumping around. In a way, this movie kind of reminded me of Lost Highway, as well as some hints of Scream. And I know it's not straight up like a slasher, but people are getting murdered, and you never know who it's going to be, that type of thing. And the crazy thing is with Jenny's supposed death, she didn't die, but I was convinced that there was like, there's no way that this is going to happen, kind of like we talked about, when it comes to like, not that she's like the final girl, but just because you kind of feel attached to that character. So to see her come back and come after Carter, questioning him, and I absolutely love that scene between them, because that's when it's like their worlds kind of like collide type of thing. And then even taking a step back, I have to mention, I love that scene with the stairs. I feel like that is just such an iconic scene where it's like, I even love the way that they deliver it to us, because in the beginning of the film, it's kind of like this movie does not hold your hand. You have to pay attention. You cannot, be on your phone. You really just have to make sure that you are paying attention, because again, when I first watched it, I had to like rewind it, go back a couple of times because there was some stuff that I even missed. Again, one of the parts that I did miss that I went back to like rewatch, and I was like, whoa, it was the beginning scene once again when he, Carter, he was just sneezing, and then the dust, and I was just like, literally, I screamed, Justin, I screamed because it was just like, it was shocking because like he was caught, but what is she gonna do, type of thing, and maybe he wasn't, So anyway, so it's just it's so cool to see that Cain, like you said, is trying to protect Carter by any means, right? And they kind of have like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, yeah, thing going on, Dr. Jekyll, whatever, right? Going on, but it's cool to see because when stuff again starts hitting the fan, you know what I mean? It happens fast when it does. And I just feel like it's one of these movies. I feel like I already said this, but it's definitely one of these movies where you have to watch it more than once to be able to not just enjoy it, you're going to enjoy it, but just to catch on. Because again, kind of like what I said, I like the fact that it doesn't hold your hand. So then by the time that Dr. Lynn, she's explaining everything, it's just kind of like, whoa, in a way, it seems far-fetched, even with the split personalities. But at this point, because we've seen it as the viewer, you're going to believe it. And the fact that she does have a history with, Carter's dad. And that's a whole different, like, I feel like it's just a very well layered movie where it's just like, I'm so curious to know more about the dad. I'm curious to know more about just, how did this come about? When did it first happen? And even when I think about this movie, it's just kind of like this. I wonder if this is what inspired Split.
I like that you said that this movie does not hold anybody's hand. I think that it expects the audience to be intelligent and paying attention. It's going to give you a lot. And part of it is Brian De Palma is a masterful storyteller, and he is great about giving you these moments that are like very stretched out, but it's for suspense. And then when things happen, they happen. Then it's sort of stretched out again, gives you it gives you a lot of room to breathe. But if you're paying attention while you're breathing, these little other things are being set up. Again, it's a moment like you think that sort of things have happened already. It's when you said everything comes together. It's when Jenny attacks Carter, but she's realizing now about Cain. The police are explaining it to her. But then you have this moment between Cain and Carter in the like police station where he's sort of like Cain's kind of like venting to Carter and is like, hey schmuck, why don't you pick up that pin right there? Don't be obvious, and it's just a subtle little moment, but it's setting up that because there's actually a whole last act that's going to happen. And again, that's also going to have some setup and everything, but I think it has this huge payoff. But yeah, as we get into this ending, I think that like so much happens the front half of the movie through the like denouement explanation, but everything is really being set up for this ending, and there really is a lot to this ending. And I think that even people that may not enjoy the first half of the movie, there's a payoff that's going to happen for the second half that everybody I think will find something to enjoy. I love that like one of the main subplots, there's this like little strange subplot that's introduced in the second half of the movie about Dr. Lynn's wig. And I love that like ends up having such a thing for the remainder of the movie. And again, the scene between Carter, well, it's really between Josh and Margo and the doctor, but when she's asking him the questions, you feel she has control because Josh is this little boy. And the vulnerability that John Lithgow has is spot on in terms of he needs to be scared, and you start to feel scared as you feel something's coming in.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden he gets this sort of transformation over his face and this creepy smile that we learn is Margo. Now, ultimately, we find out that Margo may be a hero. She's a homicidal hero, but she has a good intent. We find out that Carter's father he had did this before, and he's now trying to do it again through Carter, which is to he hurt Carter as a kid in order to generate these personalities.
Mhm.
And now he wants to do that again, but with like multiple kids. That's sort of the end goal. Margo appears because the kids are in danger. She attacks a doctor,
Mhm.
and it's a moment, it's a shocking little moment. And the way he sort of has this demeanor now that is poised, elegant. You could tell it's Margo, but then it's all set up so then Jenny, she follows him to this hotel, and the whole thing from here on out is this sort of elaborate ballet of moments. You see this truck with this sundial. Jenny is in the elevator. Jack is coming and arriving with the police. But I do like you mentioned the movie Split, and I won't get too deep into it. But similarly, I think there are definite similarities. And similarly, you have Jenny in the elevator. It's similar to the film Split in terms of you have this vulnerable woman who is in the hands essentially in this small space with somebody with this multiple personality disorder. And you don't know, is she in danger now? You don't know who this person is. You've seen this alter attack somebody already. So I like how it's all played out with the little knife, how she's just reaching, and it's heartbreaking to see her reaching for her baby. You see all the other people. But again, the Carrie moment for me is similar to with Sue Snell when you see the rope and you know that like if she just could see this rope, this thing going right here and stop this,
Yeah.
she can't. But in this scene, it works out because it really comes up to Jack, who is the one who sees what's going to happen. There's this sundial. He sees everything that we see as the audience when we're watching something like Carrie. And I love that it all works out. But to the moment where you hold your breath, you don't know how it's going to play out. And then we'll get to the final ending, but I just love how all that plays out. I think it's so fascinating. You're watching somebody, a director with artistry. You know that you're seeing something special, and it not only because it's not just a jump scare. It's not just something that pops out or boo and we get you. It's some work has to go into it, and you have to be focused to have the maximum effect. And I think that's what makes Raising Cain worth it.
I feel like I keep saying the same thing. I love it, but
Uh,
I love it. It felt like a thrilling stage play, like there's just something happening, one thing, like just one thing right after the other. Again, I love the fact that Jenny she's done taking crap,
yes.
So she decides to go there for herself to get her baby, and she came prepared. And then kind of like what you said, when she's looking at her kid and she wants to get her, and all this stuff that is happening, and then she's in the elevator with someone that she thinks is Carter, but it turns out that it's Margo. So then when we see Nick Sr., then you just find out that he like faked his own death. Like we already knew that he was Looney Tunes. We already knew that, but we didn't know that he was this Looney Tune, for it just kind of felt extremely extreme. But then again, with all the stuff that he's been doing, Nick Sr., even to his own kid, don't put anything past him, So I love the fact that this happens. And I love the fact that everyone comes together for this final scene. There is a loose end, but it's still very satisfying. I know that we'll go into more details with that, but the fact that we also get to see Jack again, because man, the way he was set up, I thought he was done for. I mean, the body was in the trunk, the blood is on his sleeve.
Right.
I believed it. I didn't believe it, but you would have believed it because everything was there.
To further piggyback onto that, because you kind of mentioned Jenny and how she's being brave and just like, no, we're not going to get my kid. Here's the thing. What I think is great about this is that there aren't any dumb characters in this movie, because who would ever suspect that this was happening, that Carter was suffering from this? It's one of those disorders that is questionable. People have their opinions on it, but we're in this world, it is real and it is a thing. But yet, who even in this world, you don't think your partner has something like this? And I think that like that's what's great about it. Because speaking to what you just joked about with Jack, he's set up because why would you not think it's him? Like, we know it's not, and we're not doubting that, but in this cinematic world, nobody's being dumb about it. There's no reason not to think it's him. It's not like you're like, oh, how can anybody think this or this? That's what's great about it, because nobody's a dumb character, because they would never, it would be fantastical for them to think, oh, maybe he's having multiple personalities. Maybe this is all about this. You trust Carter because he's a great guy. Unfortunately, he suffers from this. And like you said, I mean, his father is just diabolical. He did this to his kid. He's planning to do it to like 5 more kids, including his own granddaughter. And he has no qualms about manipulating Jenny so that she doesn't do anything, using her love for his granddaughter, not that he has any, but to stop her from doing whatever she's going to do. But I also like, so we have the setup, we have everything happens, the little girl falls, and Jack comes and saves the day, which is awesome because it's all been set up and you can finally breathe your sigh of relief, but you're almost in shock. And I love how it plays out that as you see the sort of aftermath trickle down while it's raining, you see Carter, well, now Margo, in this wig, kind of sneaking off and taking off. And I just think that's great. It's like you're just stunned. And then as Margo leaves, we dissolve into some time has passed. We're at the park again. This has sort of been a setting that keeps reoccurring through the movie. And everything seems okay, but like you said, there's this loose end. All of a sudden, I mean, I love that effect. I think it was first, one of the earlier movies was Tenebrae, Dario Argento's, where they do that effect where she's walking down the path. She's telling her daughter, Daddy's not here, because the little girl's like, Daddy's here, Daddy's here. And she's like, no, he's not, no, he's not. She bends down and there's Margo behind her. I love that effect. And, when you watch it, really is solid. You had no idea, or at least I didn't the first time, and you're like, oh my gosh, it's Margo. And it does end. I wouldn't say it's necessarily a cliffhanger ending. It's sort of like a, oh no ending. You're supposed to be left with that like feeling.
Okay, so like I feel like you explained it perfectly because I so much has happened. Just watch it. That's what I would tell people. But yeah, there's that loose end, and some time has passed. And Jenny, I guess her and Jack are trying to like kindle some stuff. You know what I mean? He likes her daughter and loves her daughter, so that everyone gets along. The little girl's at the park. She calls for her daddy. She goes running down that path. It's like, girl, pay attention to your baby. Like,
Yes,
so
I watched this with a friend the other day, and she said the same thing. She's like, well, now why aren't you watching your daughter? Like the one thing,
like, with everything that happened,
yeah,
like just
sure.
move. Why would you move?
Right?
Move.
You got money.
She does have money. Get transferred. Go on the witness protection program. Just get on out of here. So, but yeah, like her baby goes running down the path. And then, I thought that she was going to get snatched up by Margo, and then that would be her new mommy, But right. Yeah, then I love that scene when Jenny bends down to get her daughter. I literally screamed, not because I was scared, but it was just exciting because It's like, I want to know where Margo goes. What's her path? Tell us everything, And that was a good ending. I don't need anything more. You know what I mean? Sometimes I'm not gonna lie, clearly I just said that I'm curious, but then at the same time, it's like a closed chapter, especially like for Carter. And it makes me wonder, because it's just now Margo in full control, is that the end of Carter? Is Carter dead? Is Cain dead? So I just kind of took that they are, and that now Margo's running the show.
Well, and I think that's what's great about it, is that you could come away and have all these questions, but that's the ending. The ending is having these questions. I feel like even though this could be considered, it's not a cliffhanger, it has a sense of completion. Margo will never hurt the daughter, so you're hopeful because Margo won't hurt any children, but you don't know quite what she will do about this mother, because technically Margo is still Carter, who was betrayed by Jenny. Whether we kind of forgive her because Jack was the right guy for her, Carter might not think that way, and Margo through Carter might not. So anyway, my point being just what you said. It's one of those movies that has an open ending, but you feel a sense of completion, and it has some fun questions for you to kind of ask.
Again, I think that it's interesting that Jenny, which I kind of always hear that this is how it is, Jenny, before she even knew about Carter's like backstory, you know, with his multiple personalities. They seem to have a good relationship. So I'm curious, what do you think? So it's like a two-parter. What do you think about the fact that she did cheat on her husband, that she did cheat on Carter? And do you think that she should now be with Jack?
Well, I think that she should now be with Jack. And I think that with Carter, I think that they were happy. But I think that he was, there's a moment where Carter discusses how he made, this is right at the very beginning, so it's easy to miss, where he says something to the effect of, I married her too fast, or maybe no, maybe it's later on. He says it to Cain. He says, I married her too fast because she never got over him. And I think that Carter always knew that. But I think that I'm guessing he was able to suppress his personalities until his father showed back up. And I think that caused everything to start happening. But I also don't think it was the first time. I mean, there's no way that he's been perfectly happy all this time. I think that Jenny, because she settled for Carter. If there was no Jack, she would be happy with Carter. But because there is a Jack, she settled for Carter. And I think that she was sort of maybe having her own guilt about that and was overlooking some of his odd behavior. But I think that at a certain point now, which is when we begin the film, it's getting to a limit with her. Like, she's starting to question, why is he so, why not just have a radio to hear the baby? Why do we have to have a monitor? Why does he have to be there all the time with her? And I think that we're now getting to her breaking point. But honestly, that's what I think, that before, because of her own feelings for Jack and guilt, she probably looked the other way. And now she's almost expecting him to look the other way. I mean, do you agree with that? Or
I agree, yeah, because I feel like you're right. Like that's the word. She kind of like settled for him. You know what I mean? But like you said already, it's kind of like if there was no Jack, she would have been. Something I noticed with the tagline, it says, when Jenny cheated on her husband, he didn't just leave, he split. And it's just kind of like, but he always kind of had that split. But it seemed like it like amped it up to like 100 or something, It seemed like it probably wasn't as bad. So it's like that's a hot tagline.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
Seriously, this is one of those movies I feel like so much happens. It is so hard to explain it. It's like you need to just like watch this movie if you haven't seen it, or if you have seen it and it's been a while, rewatch it.
I agree completely. I think that this is the type of movie that you can just watch and enjoy the ride, but it is for those that are going to want to think a little bit, want a little bit of style, want a little bit of suspense, want some good acting, but all wrapped up in a very interesting, and even though Brian De Palma himself can be derivative of Hitchcock, it is an original idea, and it comes in a way that you're going to be not only satisfied, but left wanting more. Well, thanks again, everybody, for joining us for another episode of the Rabid Dog's House. What is your favorite Brian De Palma movie? Are you a fan of Raising Cain? What's your favorite John Lithgow performance? Thank you, Zena Dixon, the real queen of horror, for joining us. As always, you can find Zena over at Wicked Horror, over at realqueenofhorror.com, or on YouTube under her Real Queen of Horror moniker. And I'm Justin. You can find me at Wicked Horror, 411 Pop Culture, or on Twitter. Thank you, Zena, for giving Raising Cain a chance, and I'm really glad that you enjoyed it.
God, I can't wait this is like a Thanksgiving movie for the family. So we're gonna rewatch it. Thank you.
Yeah, and I forgot to say, I think it's the perfect time of year to watch it. It's got that like sort of autumn feel. Well, I'm so glad you enjoyed it. I hope everybody out there enjoyed watching along with us, and I hope to hear from you, and we'll talk to you next time.